The person who made my college years unforgettable was the last person I expected to ask me for a place to stay. My name is Ethan Brooks, and for years, I believed I had completely moved on from the most confusing chapter of my life. College was supposed to be a time of discovering who I was, building friendships, and creating memories that would last forever. Instead, one person made those years much harder than I expected. His name was Ryan Mitchell. When I first met Ryan, I thought we would never get along. He was confident, outspoken, and seemed to have a natural ability to make every room feel like it belonged to him. I was different. I preferred quiet spaces, honest conversations, and keeping a small circle of people I trusted. From the beginning, it felt like we were always on opposite sides. Ryan seemed to disagree with almost everything I said. If I shared an idea in class, he had another opinion. If we worked on the same project, our conversations somehow became competitions. I started believing that he simply did not like me. Over time, that belief became easier to accept because every interaction seemed to confirm it. I never understood why someone who barely knew me could have such a strong opinion about me. The strange thing was that Ryan was not cruel. He was not someone who tried to hurt people. He was just distant, challenging, and difficult for me to understand. Looking back now, I realize that sometimes the people we misunderstand the most are the ones we never truly take the time to know. But at the time, I only saw the frustration. After college ended, Ryan and I went completely separate ways. I moved to Seattle and started working as a graphic designer. I built a comfortable routine, surrounded myself with people who understood me, and rarely thought about those college years anymore. Ryan became a memory I had no reason to revisit. At least that was what I believed. Then, almost 7 years after graduation, I received a message from him. At first, I thought it was strange. I stared at his name on my phone, wondering why someone I had not spoken to in years was suddenly reaching out. His message was simple. He said he needed to talk to me about something important. I almost ignored it. Part of me wondered why I should reopen a connection with someone who had spent years making me feel like we were always against each other. But something made me reply. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the feeling that there was a reason behind this unexpected message. A few days later, Ryan showed up at my apartment building with a small suitcase and an expression I had never seen on his face before. He looked uncertain, almost nervous. Then he said the one thing I never expected to hear from him. He asked if he could move in with me for a while. I stood there completely confused. The guy who once seemed like he could not stand being around me was now asking to share my home. I had 100 questions running through my mind. Why me? Why now? And what had happened during all those years that brought him back into my life? Ryan looked at me and said there was something about our time in college that I never knew. Something he should have explained a long time ago. And suddenly, the person I thought I understood the most was the person I understood the least. After Ryan asked to move in, I spent the entire evening trying to understand how the person I remembered from college had suddenly become someone standing at my door asking for help. I kept thinking about all the years between us and the way our relationship had ended without either of us really saying goodbye. Ryan and I had never been close. At least that was the story I had always told myself. To me, he was the person who challenged me, questioned me, and seemed to find a reason to disagree with everything I did. So having him appear in my life again felt unexpected. It felt like opening a book I thought I had already finished reading. I invited him inside, and for a moment, neither of us knew what to say. The silence was strange because we had spent so much time in college talking, but almost every conversation back then had turned into some kind of disagreement. Now we were standing in my apartment in Seattle, older and completely different from the people we used to be. Ryan looked around and smiled slightly. He said the place felt exactly like something he imagined I would have. I laughed because even after all these years, he still somehow knew how to surprise me. I asked him the question that had been on my mind since he arrived. Why did he come to me? Ryan paused before answering. He told me that he knew it was unexpected, but he did not have many people he trusted enough to ask. That answer surprised me because I had never thought of myself as someone Ryan trusted. In college, I always assumed he saw me as someone who was difficult to work with, someone he simply tolerated. Ryan explained that things were not as simple as they seemed back then. He admitted that he knew I probably believed he disliked me. Hearing that from him was strange because it was exactly what I had thought for years. But then he said something that changed the way I viewed those memories. He said he never actually hated me. He just never knew how to communicate what he was really thinking. I did not know how to respond. Part of me wanted to believe him, but another part of me remembered every moment when I felt like he was against me. Ryan noticed my hesitation and told me that he understood why I felt that way. He said that if he were in my position, he probably would have felt the same. That was the first time I saw a different side of him. He was not defending himself or trying to change my opinion. He was simply acknowledging that my experience was real. That night, we talked longer than I expected. We discussed our lives after college, the choices we made, and the people we became. I realized that the Ryan standing in my apartment was not the same person I knew years ago. He was calmer, more thoughtful, less focused on proving himself. But even as we talked, I still had questions. If he did not hate me back then, why did he act that way? Why did he always keep such a distance? And what was the truth about our college years that he believed I never discovered? The answers were still waiting, but for the first time, I wondered if my memory of Ryan had been incomplete all along. The first night Ryan stayed at my apartment was quieter than I expected. I thought sharing the same space with someone who had once been my biggest source of frustration would feel uncomfortable, but something about the situation felt different. Maybe it was because we were no longer the same people we had been in college. We were older, more aware of ourselves, and carrying experiences that had changed the way we saw the world. Still, I could not ignore the question that kept returning to my mind. If Ryan never hated me, then why did he spend so much time acting like he did? The next morning, we sat in my kitchen drinking coffee, and I finally decided to ask him directly. I told him that I had spent years believing he disliked me. I explained that every disagreement, every serious look, and every moment when he seemed distant made me think I was someone he wanted to avoid. Ryan listened carefully before answering. He did not laugh or dismiss what I said. Instead, he nodded and admitted that he understood why I felt that way. He told me that during college, he had a difficult time expressing himself. He was competitive, stubborn, and always trying to prove that he belonged. When he met me, he saw someone who was confident in a different way. Someone who could speak honestly and stay calm even when others disagreed. Ryan said that instead of appreciating those qualities, he misunderstood them. He thought I was judging him because I did not react the way he expected. That surprised me because it was the opposite of what I had believed. I had always thought Ryan was the one judging me. Hearing his perspective made me realize how easily two people can create completely different stories from the same moments. Ryan told me about a project we worked on during our final year of college. I remembered that time as one of our biggest arguments. I thought he ignored my ideas and only cared about his own opinions. But Ryan remembered it differently. He said he actually respected my ideas and wanted to challenge them because he believed I was capable of more. He admitted that his approach was not always the best, but his intention was never to make me feel unimportant. For years, I had carried that memory as proof that we could never understand each other. Now I was seeing it from another perspective. Maybe our biggest problem was never that we disliked each other. Maybe it was that neither of us knew how to communicate. As Ryan continued explaining, I noticed something I had never seen before. He was not the confident person who always seemed certain in college. He was someone who had spent years reflecting on his mistakes and trying to become better. That realization changed something inside me. I started wondering how many other people I had misunderstood because I only saw one side of their story. Before moving in, Ryan had been the person I thought I understood completely. But after only a few conversations, I realized I barely understood him at all. And the more I learned about the past, the more I started to question whether the person I thought was my rival had actually been someone who wanted to be understood. After learning the truth about how Ryan saw our college years, I started paying closer attention to the small details I had ignored for so long. It was strange realizing that one person could exist in my memory as someone completely different from who they actually were. For years, I had carried a simple explanation for everything. Ryan was difficult because he did not like me. Ryan challenged me because he wanted to prove he was better. Ryan kept his distance because he wanted nothing to do with me. But now, living under the same roof and having real conversations with him, I was beginning to understand that people are rarely as simple as the stories we create about them. Over the next few days, Ryan and I slowly adjusted to sharing the apartment. It was not always easy because we had spent years knowing each other through conflict instead of friendship. We had different routines, different ways of approaching problems, and different personalities. But instead of turning those differences into arguments like we did in college, we started learning from them. One evening, while we were preparing dinner, Ryan brought up something from our final year at college. He asked if I remembered the time when we almost stopped working together on a major assignment. I immediately remembered it because I thought it was one of the clearest examples of how much we disagreed. I remembered feeling frustrated and convinced that Ryan did not respect my efforts. But then Ryan told me something I never knew. He said that during that time he actually admired how committed I was. He saw how much effort I put into everything and believed I was someone who cared deeply about doing things the right way. The reason he challenged me so often was because he wanted me to recognize my own abilities. Hearing that was difficult because it forced me to reconsider a memory I had held onto for years. I had always believed those moments represented everything wrong between us. But maybe they represented something completely different. Maybe they showed that two people were trying to communicate but did not know how. Ryan admitted that he was not good at expressing appreciation back then. He said that instead of telling people when he respected them, he often showed it by pushing them to improve. Looking back, he realized that approach could easily be misunderstood. I told him that I was not good at understanding people who communicated differently from me. I assumed silence meant rejection and disagreement meant dislike. That conversation became an important moment between us because we both acknowledged our mistakes. Neither of us was completely right or completely wrong. We were simply two people who were younger, less experienced, and trying to understand each other without having the tools to do it. As the days passed, I noticed that Ryan became more comfortable around me. The person who once seemed impossible to read started sharing more about himself. He talked about his goals, his worries, and the things he hoped to change about his life. I realized that the biggest difference between the Ryan I remembered and the Ryan living in my apartment was not that he had changed completely. It was that I finally had the chance to see the parts of him that were always there. The person I once thought was my enemy was slowly becoming someone I could trust. And for the first time, I wondered if our college story had never really been about conflict at all. Maybe it had always been about two people who were waiting for the right moment to understand each other. The more time Ryan and I spent together, the more I realized that the person I thought I knew in college was only a small part of who he really was. Living together created moments that we never had the chance to experience back then. We were no longer surrounded by classmates, deadlines, and the pressure of constantly trying to prove ourselves. Instead, we were simply two people sharing a home and learning how to understand each other. At first, I expected things to feel awkward. I thought there would always be a reminder of our complicated history between us. But slowly, those old assumptions started to disappear. Ryan became someone I could talk to without overthinking every word. One evening, we sat in the living room after a long day, and the conversation naturally moved toward our lives after college. Ryan asked me if I ever wondered how different things might have been if we had understood each other earlier. I admitted that I had thought about it before, but I also realized that we were probably not ready back then. We were both trying to figure ourselves out. Ryan agreed and said that college was a time when everyone was searching for confidence while secretly dealing with uncertainty. He told me that one of the reasons he respected me was because I seemed comfortable being myself. That surprised me because I had spent years thinking he saw me as someone who was too different from him. I told him that I had always believed he was the person who had everything figured out. Ryan laughed and said that was the image he wanted people to see, but it was not always the truth. He explained that being confident on the outside did not mean he always felt confident inside. There were many times when he questioned his own decisions and worried about disappointing people. Hearing that made me see him differently. The person I once thought was impossible to understand was actually someone who had been trying to protect himself just like I had. As our conversations became more honest, I noticed that we started talking about things we had never shared with anyone else. Ryan told me about moments in his life when he felt lost and unsure about his future. I shared my own experiences of feeling like I had to constantly prove that I belonged. We discovered that beneath all our differences, we had more in common than we ever realized. One night, Ryan brought up something from our first year of college. He said he remembered a moment when I helped him during a difficult project, even though I probably did not think it was important. I barely remembered the situation, but Ryan said it stayed with him because it showed him the kind of person I was. He said that was when he first realized he had misunderstood me. I was surprised because I had no idea that a small action could have meant so much to him. That moment made me understand something important. Sometimes we have no idea how our actions affect other people. We may forget moments that others carry with them for years. As the weeks passed, Ryan was no longer the person I associated with frustration from college. He became someone who made me laugh, someone whose opinions I valued, and someone I genuinely enjoyed spending time with. The biggest surprise was not discovering that Ryan had changed. It was discovering that I had never truly known him in the first place. The person I once thought was my rival was becoming someone who helped me see my own past in a completely different way. As the weeks passed, I started realizing that the biggest change in my relationship with Ryan was not something he did. It was the way I saw him. For years, I had carried a version of him in my mind that was based only on my own assumptions. I remembered the disagreements, the challenging conversations, and the moments when I felt like we were always on opposite sides. But living together showed me a completely different person. It showed me someone who cared more than he usually admitted, someone who thought deeply about his choices, and someone who had spent years trying to understand parts of himself he never shared with others. One evening, Ryan and I were sitting on the balcony of my apartment in Seattle, talking about how strange it was that life had brought us back together. We laughed about how unlikely the situation seemed. If someone had told me during college that Ryan Mitchell would one day become my roommate and one of the people I trusted most, I probably would have thought they were joking. Ryan smiled and said he probably would have thought the same thing. But then the conversation became more serious. Ryan told me there was another reason he wanted to reconnect with me. He said that before moving in, he had spent a long time thinking about whether he should reach out. He was worried that I would only remember the difficult moments between us and refuse to give him a chance. I admitted that part of me almost ignored his message because I still carried those old memories. Hearing that made him nod because he understood. He said that if he were in my position, he would probably have felt the same way. Then Ryan shared something I never expected. He told me that during college, he was not only dealing with his own uncertainty, but he was also trying to understand why he felt such a strong connection with someone he thought was completely different from him. He explained that he admired many things about me but did not know how to express it. Instead of being honest, he often turned conversations into debates because that was the only way he knew how to interact at the time. Looking back, he realized that his behavior created distance when what he actually wanted was understanding. That confession changed something inside me. I started thinking about all the times when I assumed someone's actions had a simple meaning. I realized how often we judge people based on what we see instead of asking what they might be experiencing. I told Ryan that I wished we had both been more open back then. He smiled and said that maybe we needed those years apart. Maybe we needed time to grow before we could truly understand each other. That idea stayed with me because it made me see our story differently. I had spent years thinking our college experience was something I wanted to forget. But now I saw that even the difficult moments had a purpose. They taught us patience. They taught us communication. Most importantly, they taught us that people are often more complicated than the version we create in our minds. Ryan and I were no longer two people defined by old misunderstandings. We were two adults who had finally found the opportunity to see each other clearly. And for the first time, I was not wondering why things happened the way they did. I was grateful that they happened exactly when they were supposed to. After everything Ryan had shared with me, I started looking back at our college years with a completely different perspective. It was strange how one conversation could change the meaning of so many memories. The moments I once viewed as proof that Ryan disliked me no longer felt the same. They became reminders of two people who were both trying to communicate but did not understand how to do it. The truth was not that one of us was right and the other was wrong. The truth was that we were both young, inexperienced, and carrying our own insecurities. One Saturday morning, Ryan and I decided to organize some old boxes that had been sitting in my apartment since I moved to Seattle. While going through my things, I found a notebook from my final year of college. I had forgotten about it completely. Inside were notes from classes, random thoughts, and small memories I had written down during that time. As I looked through the pages, I found several moments connected to Ryan. There were notes about group projects, conversations we had, and even small observations about how difficult it was to understand him. Seeing those words after so many years felt different. Back then, I wrote them from the perspective of someone who believed Ryan was against me. Now, I was reading them with a better understanding of who he actually was. Ryan noticed the notebook and asked what I was looking at. I showed him some of the pages, and we both laughed at how seriously we viewed everything when we were younger. But then he became quiet when he saw one particular entry. It was about a day when I wrote that I wished Ryan would stop acting like he was trying to compete with me. Ryan looked at the page for a moment and admitted that he remembered that exact day. He told me something I never knew. That was the day he realized he might have been making me feel uncomfortable. He said he wanted to explain himself, but he did not know how to start the conversation. Instead of saying something honest, he became even more distant. Hearing that made me realize how many opportunities we had both missed. We were both waiting for the other person to make the first move. We were both protecting ourselves from rejection without realizing that we were creating the distance we were afraid of. Ryan told me that one of his biggest regrets from college was allowing a misunderstanding to last for so long. I told him that I had the same regret. But instead of feeling sad about the years we lost, we found ourselves appreciating the fact that we finally had the chance to talk about it. That evening, we sat together and talked about how different our lives could have been if we had understood each other earlier. But neither of us wanted to stay focused on what we could not change. The past had already happened. What mattered was what we chose to do now. I realized that sometimes the people who challenge us the most are the people who can teach us the most about ourselves. Ryan was never the enemy I thought he was. He was someone I had misunderstood, someone who had his own struggles, and someone who had been trying to find a way to connect with me. The person I once avoided understanding had become the person who helped me understand myself better. As the days turned into weeks, I noticed something I never expected to happen. Ryan was no longer just someone from my past. He had become part of my everyday life. The apartment that once felt like my own quiet space had slowly become a place filled with conversations, laughter, and memories we were creating together. It was strange to think that the person I once believed I could never understand had become someone I looked forward to seeing at the end of the day. One evening, after we finished dinner, Ryan and I sat in the living room talking about the future. We had spent so much time discussing the past that we rarely talked about where we wanted to go next. Ryan told me that moving in with me had changed his perspective on many things. He said he originally thought he was only looking for a temporary place to stay, but he did not expect to reconnect with someone who would make him rethink so many old memories. I asked him if he ever regretted reaching out to me. Ryan immediately said no. He told me that he was nervous when he sent that first message because he knew there was a chance I would not want to hear from him. But he also knew that avoiding the conversation would mean carrying the same unanswered questions forever. Hearing that made me appreciate the courage it took for him to come back into my life. I realized that sometimes the hardest conversations are the ones that create the most meaningful changes. Ryan and I had spent years believing we were too different to understand each other. But now we knew that our differences were never the real problem. The problem was that we never gave ourselves the opportunity to see beyond our assumptions. A few days later, we decided to visit a coffee shop near my apartment that reminded me of the kind of places we used to spend time around during college. Sitting there together felt almost unreal. We were in the same city, sharing stories, and laughing about moments that once felt frustrating. Ryan joked that our younger selves would never believe we would end up having conversations like this. I agreed because the idea seemed impossible back then. But life has a way of creating unexpected paths. During that afternoon, Ryan told me that he was grateful we had another chance to understand each other. He said some people enter our lives at the wrong time, but that does not mean the connection was meaningless. Sometimes people need time to grow before they can truly appreciate what they have in front of them. Those words stayed with me because they perfectly described our journey. We were not the same people we were in college. We had changed, learned, and experienced life outside of that small world. The person I once saw as a difficult memory had become someone who brought comfort and honesty into my life. I no longer thought about the years we spent misunderstanding each other. Instead, I thought about the opportunity we had been given. Ryan and I did not erase the past. We simply learned how to understand it. And as we continued building our new routine together, I realized that sometimes the people we think we know the most are the ones who still have the most to show us. Looking back at everything that happened, I still find it hard to believe how much my life changed because of one unexpected message. If someone had told me years ago that Ryan Mitchell would become one of the most important people in my life, I would have never believed them. During college, I thought I understood him completely. I thought he was someone who challenged me because he did not like me. I thought our differences meant we could never truly connect. But time had a way of showing me that I was only seeing a small part of the story. Living together gave us something we never had before. It gave us time to talk without pressure, without competition, and without the assumptions that had followed us for years. We finally had the chance to see each other as we really were. Ryan was no longer just the person from my memories. He was the person who made me laugh after difficult days, the person who listened when I needed someone to understand me, and the person who reminded me that first impressions are not always the truth. One evening, as we were sitting in the apartment where so many new memories had been created, Ryan and I talked about how different everything felt. He said that when he first reached out, he expected the conversation to be difficult. He thought I might still see him as the person he was in college. I admitted that part of me did. But I also told him that I was grateful I gave him the chance to explain himself. Ryan smiled and said that he was grateful too. He told me that sometimes people spend years believing a story about someone else without realizing that the story might be incomplete. That idea stayed with me because it described our entire journey. We both created versions of each other based on limited moments. We took small misunderstandings and turned them into a complete picture. But people are not defined by one conversation, one mistake, or one period of their lives. People grow. They change. They become more than the version others remember. As time passed, our living arrangement eventually became a symbol of something much bigger than sharing an apartment. It represented a second chance. A chance to correct old assumptions. A chance to have conversations we avoided for years. A chance to build something meaningful from a connection we once thought was impossible. I often thought about the younger versions of ourselves in college. I wondered what they would think if they saw us now. Maybe they would be surprised. Maybe they would not understand how two people who seemed so different could become so close. But I think they would eventually realize the same thing we learned. Sometimes the people who challenge us are the people who help us grow the most. Ryan was never the person I believed he was. He was someone with his own fears, his own struggles, and his own reasons for the way he acted. And I was the same. We were two people who needed time to become ready for the conversation we should have had years earlier. In the end, I did not just gain a roommate. I gained a deeper understanding of another person and a reminder that everyone carries a story we may never see. The person I once misunderstood became someone I truly appreciated. And the experience taught me that sometimes the most unexpected connections can become the most meaningful ones.